Good morning, friends. Yes, that was an unusual title, and it is significant this morning. The first thing I would like to say is it is a pleasure to be with you this morning. And when I thought about that as my opening line, I thought, good grief, Linda, you've used that cliche for how many weeks now? What do you really mean? And what I really mean when I say it is a pleasure to be with you this morning, it is an honor and it is a privilege that I am invited to speak with you and to speak those truths that altered my life over more than 40 years now. And the word remember is an interesting word. Most frequently, we think of it as the faculty of bringing back to mind something. And at the very beginning of our session this morning, when we were just working with the team, and I thank the team for their patience and the indulgence, I had such a lapse of remembering. We were talking about hymns, and I said, I remember a recording of How Great Thou Art by, and I couldn't think of the name of the person. And he was famous. I mean, really famous. Okay, I was not a fan, but I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I should make an appointment on Tuesday and go see my doc. Finally, we had a few more words. We discussed something else, and suddenly I blurted out, Elvis Presley. It was Elvis Presley. I wish you could have seen the smile on Sean's face, Betsy's face, Jackie's face. I'm sure they were overjoyed that I remembered the name and that the minister this morning still had her wits about her. You actually may sit there and say, but Reverend Linda, why are you calling it the power of remembering? The last time I checked Charles Fillmore's book on the 12 powers, remember wasn't one of them. That is correct, friends. You are accurate in that assessment. Remembering is a word that we use to describe a function of our mind or our brain, or the mind which inheres in the brain, although we know it now inheres in the entire body. It is calling to mind something that we knew before. And I've had enough Memorial Day weekends to have a lot of memories, and I thought of some of them. I remember one of them was sitting in the car with my mom and my dad. We were parked on a side street near, this was in Rochester, New York, and it was the Red Wings ballpark. We hadn't bought tickets to go in and see the game, but what we were waiting for was for dusk to fall so we could see the fireworks for free. And I'm sure many of us have happy memories on Memorial Day of eating the first watermelon of the season, or baking the first peach pie of the season, or a softball game among our aunts and uncles and cousins by the dozens. In other words, we have memories. But what I would like us to do is I would like us to look at the word remember and take it apart, which is why Betsy had to find it so that she could say it's re-member. And for that, I would like to read you a somewhat lengthy story, so please bear with me. It will take a few minutes. This is a true story of a young man who had just finished college, so he was about 22, 21, 22, 23. He decided he was going to go on what we now call a walkabout. And so that's how he ended up in Gillette, Wyoming. And it was a morning in late October, and his pack leaned against the guardrail, and an interstate map, it was in his back pocket. Semis rattled over the bridge spacers and hurtled on towards the Rockies 100 miles away. Pickup trucks passed with men in them who turned to stare as they went by. A few unrolled their window and threw beer bottles at me. that exploded harmlessly against the asphalt. He continues, in my pack, I had a tent and a sleeping bag, a set of aluminum cookpots, and a Swedish-made camping stove that ran on gasoline and had to be pressurized with a thumb pump. That and a week's worth of food was all I had with me outside Gillette, Wyoming that morning when I saw a man walking toward me up the on-ramp from town. From a distance, I could see that he wore a quilted old canvas union suit. Okay, for those of us who are younger, a union suit is like a one piece of long underwear, except this one was quilted so that it could be worn as an outer garment and was warmer. So here he is in this union suit. He carried a black boxed lunch. You just have to figure that one out if you've never seen one, but those of us who have know exactly what I mean. I took my hands out of my pockets and turned to face him. He walked up and stood there studying me. His hair was wild and matted, and his union suit was shiny with filth and grease at the thighs. He didn't look unkindly, but I was young and alone, and I watched him like a hawk. He asked me where I was headed. California. How much food you got? I thought about this. I had plenty of food, along with the rest of my gear, and he obviously didn't have much. I'd give food to anyone who said he was hungry, but I didn't want to get robbed, and that's what seemed was about to happen. Oh, just a little cheese. I lied. I stood there ready, but he just shook his head. You can't get to California on just a little cheese. You need more than that. The man said he lived in a broken down car and that every morning he walked 3 miles to a coal mine outside of town to see if they needed fill-in work. Some days they did, some days they didn't, and this was one of the days they didn't. So I won't be needing this, he said, and he opened his black lunchbox. I saw you from town and I just wanted to make sure you were okay. The lunchbox contained a bologna sandwich, an apple, and a bag of potato chips. The food had probably come from a local church pantry. I had no choice but to take it. I thanked him and put the food in my pack for later and wished him luck. Then he turned and made his way back down the on-ramp toward Gillette. The author then continues. I thought about that man for the rest of my trip. I thought about him for the rest of my life. He'd been generous, yes, but lots of people are generous. What made him different was the fact that he'd taken responsibility for me. He'd spotted me from town and walked half a mile up the highway to make sure I was okay. A famous American poet, Robert Frost, once wrote that home is the place where when you go there, they have to take you in. The word tribe is far harder to define, but a start might be the people you feel compelled to share the last of your food with. For reasons I'll never know, the man in Gillette decided to treat me like a member of his tribe. So I would like us to look at the word remember. If we take it apart, the former English teachers will know that re is a prefix that means to do something again. So if we remember in the simplest sense, we are remembering, we are reliving, we are rethinking, we may even be re-experiencing something from before. But if we look at the word member, and the way we use it more today, like, oh, she's a member of that church, he's a member of that club. I need to pay my membership dues down at the community center. Member means a part of something. We could say, I am a member of that tribe, when we use the word tribe not as a designation of an ethnicity or a culture, but a much larger universal concept of belonging. I would like to use the word to remember today, to recognize that we are all one. So going back to the 12 powers, I would say that to remember that we are all one would certainly be a power. I think of the words of Jesus when he said, I in thou and thou in me. He is speaking of a universal, everlasting, unending, eternal relationship. Whether we are in the body, in this life, experiencing day to day, or we have transitioned to the next experience of life through the process that humans call death, and of which, the beyond which we are slightly uncertain. We have speculated, but we don't know for sure. But we premise and choose to believe that we are always one in God. Always one in God. We talk about the family of man, the family of humankind. I wish we talk about the family of men and women, but that's just an issue that I have. I'm very specific about language choices. So I like the word humankind better, the family of humankind. And then we also have the phrase, the family of God, which is one of the reasons that I chose this hymn. As I was sharing this morning before we started our service, this is one of the first hymns that I ever encountered when I was invited to attend a Unity church. This is my Father's World. It doesn't say how old it is. It says it's adapted from somebody named Maltby Babcock. Never heard of him. But apparently it has a Latin name. It is called Terra Beata, Terra Beata, which in Latin would mean blessed land. Blessed land. So this is my Father's world, and it is a blessed land. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. That's pretty eloquent. I don't know if we hear the music of the spheres anymore. What I hear is the fire engine and the police car go by on a pretty regular basis. And I remind myself to be grateful that the firehouse is as near to my home as it is, just in case. It really is the last stanza that always makes me pay attention. This is my Father's world. Do not let me forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. That's kind of archaic language, that though the wrong seems oft so strong. What that means is a lot of bad stuff happens more than we'd care to see it happen. I'm not going to go into that because, unless you've been living under a rock in the last 2 weeks and the last 2 years, we know what bad stuff looks like. That's not what we focus on. What we focus on is the phrase which says, God is the ruler, yet this is my Father's world. How could my heart be sad? So we look at our unity principles, which we reaffirm every Sunday and hopefully whenever you have an opportunity, and remind yourself that there is one power and one presence in the universe, God the good, omnipotent, meaning all powerful, omnipresent, everywhere. I and thou and me. We live and move and have our being in God. It is God who indwells within us. This is my Father's world. How could my heart be sad under those circumstances? And I thought to myself, oh, lovely words, lovely sounds, lovely thoughts. Yeah, but how do we do it? What is required for us to stay in that consciousness and to recognize our oneness, both in our divinity and in our humanity? It doesn't matter what word we use for God, whether we call Yahweh or Jehovah or Jesus or Allah or whatever. I had a teacher at Unity Village School, friends, when I was going. It was called Unity School for Religious Studies back in the mid-'80s. I'm not going to name her, but her name for God was Sweetie Pie. And she thought God was blue. And no, she wasn't crazy. She wasn't demented. She wasn't old. She was an outstanding teacher. But what she had done was she had personalized her sense of God so that its meaning was really intimate and powerful for her. So maybe while we're remembering, while we are focusing again on our membership in God's family, we might want to rename God to something very intimate to us. But there are three characteristics or ways of being or concepts that I think are required for us to remember our unity in our humanity and our divinity. The first one is willingness. Now, willingness is a form of the word for will, which we know is a power, the power of will. And it is the exercise of will that leads us to willingness. It is surrendering, this is how I want it done, to how would you like it done, God? Can you reveal that to me? That I may accept it, that I may go, oh yeah, that's so much better than what I came up with. So we engage in that willingness, which is not surrender. It's not waving the white flag. It's not throwing in the towel. It's none of those cliches that imply failure. It is, in fact, a willingness to be powerful, to be who we really are, an individualized expression of God. Which brings us to the second concept, and that's enthusiasm. You know, when Charles Fillmore said that he fairly sizzled with zeal, he was talking about enthusiasm. We don't use words like that anymore today, but they illustrate for us a concept that is part of our divine makeup. The word enthusiasm comes from the Greek entheos, meaning the God within. So when we bring our enthusiasm to being willing to look out over our world and go, the diversity that I see is so amazing. And if you don't get that, I hope you know, and I'm sure you've heard this before, there are no two sets of fingerprints alike. Every single human being on planet Earth has an individualized set of fingerprints. Think about the infinite number of fingerprints in the world, and each one belongs to a godly hand. Each one belongs to a hand that can reach out to another, to lift them up, to give them a stroke of comfort when they are in need. And this is our willingness to exercise the God-given gifts that are within us by virtue of the God within. The other word or concept is harmony. Harmony. I'm sure that Jackie, our wonderfully talented musician, could give us an elaborate explanation of harmony that would be musically erudite and brilliant. I don't have that skill, alas. I'm lucky I can carry a tune. I have a good chorus voice, but you don't want to hear me sing a solo. You really don't. So what is harmony? What is harmony? We often eloquently in poetry speak of the harmony of the spheres, the harmony of nature. Harmony is a concept that we manufacture within ourselves to perceive the world. And once again, it's why I chose this world. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ear. Do I hear harmony? Do I hear oneness? Or do I deliberately choose to hear dissonance? Do I look at, oh, that's not what I believe, as wrong, or, well, that's an interesting concept. Say more about that. This is my Father's world. We engage in it with our senses, our 5 outer senses and our 5 inner senses. We see with our eyes, we smell with our nose, we taste with our mouth, we hear with our ears, we touch with our hands. It's what is evident to us. And yet we are called by our divine nature to see with the inner senses. We look beyond the difference. We don't see tall, short, fat, thin, straight hair, kinky hair, the colors of skins. We don't see genders. We see only an individualized picture of God in complete and total uniqueness. As I said, today is a day that we worship the God within us. Tomorrow is a federal holiday. It is a conscious action by human beings to remember those members of their tribe who sacrificed that we may have the freedom to have these experiences, to have these memories. Our tribe, my dear friends, consists of those who have been, those who are now, and those yet to come. I remember when I was a little kid, and this is probably going to give away my age, Memorial Day was also called Decoration Day. Decoration Day. Because what we did was we went to the cemetery and we decorated the graves of members of our family or people we knew with floral tributes. You could actually see wreaths or other forms, other beautiful forms of flowers alongside the road. You could stop, you could buy one, take it in your car, and then go and place it as a loving tribute to the one who is gone. It was about that time, maybe it was a little bit later. I'm thinking I must have been 10 or 12 by then, when I was one day in the rear of the sanctuary of my Catholic church, St. Teresa of the Little Flower. I don't know why I was there. It wasn't church time. I was probably, I don't know, maybe helping the sisters decorate or something, or clean or whatever, when I noticed a plaque on the wall that I had never noticed before. I went over and I looked at it, and it had a flag or two, and it had some lovely words, and then it had names in 2 different columns. And I couldn't believe it. But I found my 4 uncles' names: Chester, Eugene, Raymond, Leon, Kubiak. Their names were under the list of those who had returned, because at the other end of the plaque were those who had not, and their names were under a cross. I didn't know those people, but I knew some of the names because they were members of my spiritual community. They might have even been, as we say, cousins by marriage. It is important to us to remember who we are, that we are one tribe, that we are united, that we are united in our purpose to be the infinite, loving example of a human being who represents God. I recently had a conversation with someone who said, I don't know about this sentence in scripture where it says, and God created us in our image and likeness. I was thinking maybe that person was having a bad hair day and wasn't happy with her hair. She was hoping for something better. I couldn't quite figure out what she meant. Obviously, she had not yet been exposed to the awareness that we are created in the spiritual image of God, and that our bodily form is our individualized form. I thought, well, okay, that's her take on this. Does it make her wrong? No. Does it make her less spiritual? No. Does it make her a not good person? No. It just makes her another individual who offered me another perspective. If we can come to the place where we can recognize that we're all here together, or to put it very commonly, we all get into our underwear the same way, folks, 1 foot at a time. That really reduces us to being aware of our humanity. Before I close, I would like us to think of the word tribe, to think of it not from our history books, not from our museums, not relegated to, Native Americans or Indians, they had tribes, but to expand it. A tribe is a group of people. It's much harder to define, friends. But as the writer said, a tribe, a good place to start, might be the people you feel compelled to share the last of your food with. And he goes on to say, for reasons I'll never know, the man in Gillette decided to treat me like a member of his tribe. So let us think for a moment. How do we treat one another as members of our tribe? Goodness gracious, could we smile at strangers? Could we open the door for somebody? Could we go so far? I've never done this. Maybe this is something I need to do. I don't cross toll bridges, but I don't know. I once in a blue moon, I'm in the line for coffee. Maybe I could pay for the coffee behind me. Or I could at least say, here's $2 for the next man's coffee. If he's having a $6 latte, the $4 is going to be on him. What can I do? What can we do when we pick up a piece of trash from our neighborhood? Do it carefully, use a Kleenex. Don't endanger yourself with germs. Pick it up, take it home, and put it in your own garbage can. It has been said, am I my brother's keeper? We are our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper, our cousin's keeper, our aunt's keeper, our uncle's keeper. We are the keepers of one another as we behold the Christ in them. And that Christ is another concept that we need to hold before us. It is the awareness that each and every one of us is God in human form, who deserves to be loved, respected, honored, so that we may honor, respect, and love the God within us. Can I close with the corny remark? Every time you got two fingers pointing out, folks, you got two fingers pointing out, you got three pointing back at you.